We're on. Okay, good afternoon, everyone from 1340 Land. My name is Suzanne Arkowski. I'm this year's president of the Residents Council, and this is our, I believe, fourth Council Connections program. And the last three, we have featured a chairman of one of the committees to talk about the committee, and are doing the same thing again today. Today's chairman is Deborah Moore. She's chairman of the Landscape Committee, and we'll be talking about the Landscape Committee in just a couple minutes. First, I wanted to update you a little bit on what the council is doing. We have all just spent 2 weeks in quarantine in our cottages or apartments. And if you're anything like me, you were going really stir crazy. I managed to get out for a walk, but still stir crazy. One of the things that for me helped was to be able to get on Zoom on my computer and visit with people. And I know many of you are doing that. Some of you maybe would like to do it and have not. Another thing on the computer is YouTube. It's a wonderful means of different kinds of information and entertainment. And again, many of you are doing that. Some of you may want to do it. And the council is going to be sending out a survey soon, just asking you if you would like to, what kind of device do you have? And it's a very short survey. It'll be coming around soon. So please fill it out and send it back in, because one of our goals is to try to get more people onto the internet, especially when we have our lockdowns and quarantines. It's a wonderful tool. So if you've not used it before, please consider getting attached, or not attached to it, but hooked up and learning how to do it. And with that, I'm going to be turning the meeting over to Deborah to talk about the Landscape Committee.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, Woodland Ponders. I'm delighted to be here. I hope to recruit new members to the Landscape Committee by what I'm about to say. First of all, there's a lot of confusion between the Landscape Committee and the Garden Committee, so let's deal with that first. The Garden Committee is primarily interested in the gardening boxes which are outside the art room door, and you should approach them to use one of those garden boxes. Their focus is also primarily on the garden tour, which they traditionally hold every June. So that's their principal focus. The Landscape Committee is a whole different breed of cat. We're interested in the entire campus and the way the campus is planted and is growing. So we're going to be talking about trees and shrubs and perennials rather than garden boxes. So Suzanne was surprised the other day when I told her a little bit about the history of how the Landscape Committee came to be. So I'm going to let you know. There are a couple of problems after Bob and I moved in 6 years ago that I noticed in my walking around the campus. And so I recruited some of our major gardeners like Cynthia Fisher and Vicki Danskin and Faye Bishop to come together and talk about what I was seeing. And I was seeing our landscape contractor, which at the time was Red Oak, using power equipment to shape the trees and the shrubs. And they would just go, and they would turn all of our trees and shrubs into bowling balls and hockey pucks with this approach with power equipment. And looking at that didn't make a lot of sense to me because it's an enormous campus and we had lots of little things that needed to get bigger. And it's also a very formal way of doing landscaping. And so we got together in the committee, we talked about whether or not we liked this look, whether or not a less formal, more naturalistic look might be a better choice. And we all agreed that we preferred the naturalistic look. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with the formal look. There are a lot of people who like it, but we all felt that for this particular campus, the naturalistic look would be a better way to go, which means we got the contractor to stop pruning with the power equipment. And then I taught Mark, our outside guy, how to prune a bush without making it look like it's been pruned. At the end of a good pruning session, you have an enormous pile of debris, but it doesn't look like the bush has been touched. It still looks untouched. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing is I had noticed that in front of the main building, there's a huge foundation bed. And many of the things that had originally been planted there, unfortunately, had died, but they hadn't been replaced. So there were enormous tracts of empty mulch in that bed. I didn't think that looked very attractive. So I suggested to the committee that what we needed to do was to have some sort of plan to replant that bed and several other areas around the campus. They all thought that was a great idea. But it's a lot of work determining what's going to go into a bed like that. So Cynthia Fisher and I formed a subcommittee to go out and actually walk that bed and decide which rhododendron would go in this spot and which juniper would go in that spot and which dogwood would go in this spot. And we laid out an entire planting plan and then listed all the materials. One red maple tree, 2 dogwoods, 2 cherries, 4 rhododendrons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We had this huge plant list. So when we got all of that finalized, I then took that material and I thought to myself, well, if I just go to Michelle and say, gee, you should really do something about these empty beds, nothing would happen, because with my experience in publishing, that's the kind of thing that falls to the bottom of everybody's priority list. So what we took our plan and our plant material list, and I sent it out to a variety of landscapers, and I asked them to bid on it. The bids came back. I took the bids to Michelle and I said, Michelle, we've got this problem with this empty bed. Here are plans to fill it, and it would cost about $15,000 according to these bids. Do you think this is something that we should do? And she said, well, yes, that's a great idea, but I'm not sure we've got the money for it. She said, let me sit with this. Let me think if there's some place I can get the money. Fine. So then I came back to her a week or so later and she said, yes, found the money. Let's do it. And so I said, okay, this is the name and the contact information for the lowest bid. And then she negotiated the contract with the contractor. We set up the schedule and got it all done. And we were all very pleased with the results. Management was pleased with it. The residents were pleased with it. We were all delighted. So then we let that settle for 2 years, and then we did it again. Came up with a plan, identified the places that needed to be dealt with, found a contractor who would do it for approximately $15,000 again, took the proposal to Michelle, and once again, she said, yep, let me see if I can find the money. And sure enough, she was able to find the money. And the second planting took place. So that's how the committee got rolling. But now that it's perking along, one of the things that has happened, which is terrific, is we have hired Mark, well, not we, me, management has hired Mark Eisenhandler, who is an experienced gardener and garden maven, and to come and be our garden person on staff. And he's doing a wonderful job for us. If you have noticed some of the changes around here, for example, for the last 2 summers, Mark has put an entire azalea bed outside the art room door, and it has come up. Oh, thank you, thank you. She's just corrected me. It's not an azalea bed. It's a zinnia bed. Yes, my problem. Oh well, it gets Z's in there. And anyway, so he's put in these 2 zinnia beds that have looked terrific each summer, and we have really appreciated his efforts wherever he has turned his hand in making our campus look better and better. He's done wonderful things for the Wander Garden just outside of Garden View, putting in more plants that are safe to touch, smell, and taste, as well as looking good. So we're very happy with a number of the things that he has achieved for us.
One of the things that I was impressed with, being the liaison to the landscape committee, I've been attending, but Mark recently has put in a lot of perennials,
Yes.
and his way of describing them is the first year you put them in, they sleep. The second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So the third year we're going to have a beautiful hillside outside the south wing, because this year they slept.
Yes, that's the garden that Mark refers to as the Prairie Garden. It's on a hillside facing south, on the south side of the wing. So it is brutalized by summer sun. So it's a tough place for plants to grow. So he identified a number of perennials that would do well in well-drained, extremely sunny environments, and then planted them. And they're coming along. So I think you're going to be very excited to see that. We're also seeing a resurgence of butterflies, which has been terrific. And we think that's primarily due to the subcontractor that LCS hired, who toned down the chemicals they were putting on the grass to control the weeds and the bugs. So we've gotten rid of the grubs that were eating our roses, but it's not lethal to the butterflies, so we're getting more butterflies back. That's a wonderful result that has been able to be achieved. One of the other focuses of the Landscape Committee is the memorial trees. When people lose their loved ones, one of the things that we can do is we can plant a tree to memorialize them. And several residents have already done that. Al Hoffman, Rhea Stein, and Larry Randall have already planted memorial trees for their loved ones. And this is great. One of the things that the committee can help you with is determining what sort of tree do you want? Do you want a flowering tree? Do you want a shade tree? And then we can help you identify the location where that tree will thrive. One of the problems is we know it would be terribly disappointing if somebody identified a tree, identified a location for it, and then the tree did not do well in that location because it's too wet, too dry, too windy, too shady, whatever. So we can provide a useful service to you if you would like to plant a memorial tree, because we can help you find the right tree for the right location so that hopefully it will thrive for decades to come. So if you have any concerns about a memorial tree that you would like to plant around the campus, please call me, call any member of the committee who you'd like to talk to, and we'll be happy to help.
Pat Houck is doing that right now.
Yeah, Pat Houck is in the process of identifying a tree that she would like. We've identified what tree she'd like and where she would like it. In this fall season, though, we've only been able to find rather smallish specimens for her. So we're going to wait until the spring, and hopefully she'll have a better selection and we can get a bigger tree for her money.
I have a question, Deborah. Are these memorial trees in any way identified? If somebody is walking around the campus, would they know this is a memorial tree for such and such?
At the moment, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can certainly tap into the same little plastic plaques that are put on the memorial benches, and we should be able to hang those on the memorial trees.
I think that would be a wonderful touch.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
We should also probably identify what species of tree it is. So we'll have the name of the person who's being remembered as well as the species of the tree so that people can look at it and find out.
That would be wonderful. This may be a long stretch, but is there any way of identifying where on campus these trees are? Without having a map of the campus, I don't know that you could do that, but I'm just curious.
Well, I know where they are. You can always ask me, but no, I haven't written it down.
Okay.
But yes, they, they're, I know exactly where they are. One of the things which is interesting about this particular campus is it's very windy. And this idea of getting the right tree in the right place is really important. Originally, when the campus was built, the area just outside the art room door had a grove of little birch trees planted there. But apparently, the little birch trees did not like that area and they all died almost immediately. There's a similar grove of little birch trees over near the Wander Garden, and they have fared much better, although they're breaking down now. So it's one of the things that we need to watch out for is making sure that we put the right tree in the right place so it can be happy.
Yeah. Well, even in the wild, if they seed lands in the wrong place, it doesn't thrive.
Right.
So I can understand that a lot.
We also keep an eye on pests. For example, one resident called me to tell me that she had spotted bagworms on our big juniper bushes. So I went out and looked, and sure enough, we have lots of bagworms. So we have started cutting back on the junipers because that's the only way you can really get them is you have to cut them out one at a time. And then also in my walks around the campus, I noticed a number of our elm trees looking sickly. And sure enough, we brought in an arborist who said, no, I don't think that's Dutch elm disease. It's something else. But we had to lose 2 of our elm trees and replace them. So that's the kind of thing that we're constantly watching for problems and trying to marshal our forces to fight off problems as soon as we see them.
I think the Landscape Committee is a perfect example of residents watching out, doing what they do, and the rest of us are totally unaware of what they're doing. But if they didn't do it, we'd notice.
That's true. And I get calls from residents all the time pointing out problems that need to be addressed. Mary Van Winkle used to call me and complain about a little tree near the south wing that was all bent out of shape. And so I finally went out and pruned it severely. And fortunately, it has come back very, very well. And it now is no longer contorted into a bizarre shape. And it's looking like a normal cherry tree. And once again, the residents are very helpful in helping us spot problems so that we can deal with them. So anytime you have a problem with something going on in the landscape, let me know. We may be able to fix it.
I will say, having been the liaison, the council liaison for the Landscape Committee for the last 2 years, I'm a gardener. I plant tomatoes, I plant flowers, I plant cucumbers, and they do pretty well. But joining as a liaison, the Landscape Committee, these people know so much more than I do. They would throw out names of things and they all knew what they were talking about. I didn't. It was quite impressive.
Yeah, so if you're interested in gardening on a large scale, instead of on a small scale, come to the Landscape Committee. I think we've got something that you'll be interested in.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. And so, do you have anything else to add? I have no more questions.
Do I have anything else to add? No, I think that's really about it. It's a big job, but it's not something that we do, every hour of every day. It needs a little tweak here and a little tweak there, and we do that. And we have a good time doing it. It gives us an opportunity to interact with and talk about what trees will be best. Oh, here's one of the great debates that we constantly have in the committee is we would like to spend more of our efforts on native species because that supports the insects, it supports the animals, it supports the entire environment. Well, great. And that's a wonderful thing. But oh my goodness, it is so difficult to draw the line of what's a native species and what isn't. Because there are the obvious ones like Joe Pye weed, native species, terrific. American holly, yes. But then there are beloved things like roses and forsythia, and they have been in the US for many, many decades, in fact, hundreds of years when you're talking about roses. So if you wanted to eliminate roses because it's not a native species, I think everybody would have a heart attack. So yes, we are trying to incorporate more native species into the campus. It's not a perfect plan, and there are all sorts of squishiness in terms of what is and what isn't native.
Case in point, they know what they're talking about. I didn't know they weren't native because even the wild rose is the New York State flower. Now, is the wild rose also an introduced species?
I believe it is. The ones that you put in your garden originated in China. I guarantee you that's
Okay.
not a native species. The wild roses, if memory serves, they are also not native.
Even though it's our state flower?
Even though it's the state flower.
Something. Okay, interesting. Okay, now I truly have no more questions.
Good. I don't have anything more to say, so I think we're done.
Okay, I would like to add a couple notes of a little bit of humor that are so appropriate for this year, especially we're just coming off of a quarantine. I am getting tired of being part of a major historical event. I think we all are. And one day, we'll all be able to tell our grandkids or great-grandkids, as the case may be, I survived the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. And on that note, we're going to say adieu. Have a wonderful afternoon, and it is gorgeous outside if at all possible. Get out and take a walk.
Get out there and enjoy our campus that we
Yes.
worked hard on.
Enjoy the landscape. Thank you, Deborah.
My pleasure, Suzanne.
Until we do the switch.